Hello friends, and welcome back to another episode debrief. Gonna try and keep it a little bit shorter, a little bit more concise this week. We'll see how well it goes. We are discussing this video from the main channel last Friday. A lot of outdoor stump removal work and a really popular episode from everybody who was watching it. So let's jump right in. Make sure you've got, whatever it is that you're working on, if you're going to be cleaning on in the background, if you've got, your pet right next to you, get all settled in. Let's talk about some of the questions you had, some of the comments that y'all left me. Get into that. It was overall, like I said, a really popular video. People super loved this episode, particularly the editing. I got a lot of comments, really nice comments on the editing, which honestly surprised me because it was the same editing job as always. If anything, it was actually faster and easier because it was almost entirely voiceover. That's why the editing time at the end is much shorter. I think this one was only 17 hours or so for a 24 minute video, something like that. Usually it takes me about 1 hour to edit 1 minute of footage. So a 24-minute video would have taken me roughly 24 hours. This one was only 17, and that is because my editing job was a little bit easier because I basically just sat there and did voiceover. Very, very boring for me on my end, but everybody, obviously it didn't bleed through into the final video because everybody loved it. So many comments on that, which was unexpected, but again, of course, welcome. Tina says, love the editing that makes watching stump removal entertaining. Sardi says, oh my goodness, Shannon, the editing, the slow motion and music were amazing. My kids came running in and we must have rewatched the tree, root, and claw sections 100 times. Absolute perfection. So thank you so much for all the love on the editing. I'm glad that you guys at least were entertained by it, even if it was honestly pretty darn boring for me to put together. Then another category of comment that got a lot of reactions was the tree root tango, as some of you called it. Phil dancing in slow motion with the tree root. This was funny because, of course, this was all filmed over a year ago. I didn't remember filming this at all, and I didn't remember which clips I had put in slow motion, and I was watching this one back, and I was watching it in slow motion, and it wasn't until I accidentally scrubbed through it much faster that I realized that Phil was actually doing a dance. So then I thought, okay, we can make something out of this moment, and people really enjoyed it. Kelly says, Phil dancing with the tree is by far the best clip of the year, in my opinion. And someone else said it looks like Phil's dancing with Groot, which made me laugh really hard. That was pretty fun. Another comment here from Louise says, even in a scary process of removing stubborn stumps, y'all created 3 dance trends: root dancing, excavator dancing, and foundation dancing, which does take us into the foundation, which also got a lot of amazed and bemused comments from viewers. Nikki Knickers says, me holding my breath and gasping every time I saw the foundation jiggle. Yeah, the funny thing about this was that I was actually quite concerned that it wouldn't translate as well on screen, because as I watched the footage back, I could kind of see the foundation moving, but it was nothing compared to in real life. In real life, it was so much more visible. You could really see how much the foundation was moving. So as I sat down to edit it, I was quite concerned that actually it wasn't going to translate. People weren't going to see just how much the foundation was moving. And fortunately, based on all the comments that I got, I was able to kind of help that become visible on screen. Marilyn wrote, oh, the agony of watching the foundation shift. And Wildflowers Creation wrote, watching the foundation move that much is so scary. So yeah, fortunately, I will say it was moving much more. It was more visible how much the foundation was shifting in real life, but yeah, some fun touches to kind of highlight that, like the mortar jumping out of there, and it was just, you needed to know where to watch. If you had a good point of reference, like the background foundation that wasn't moving, and then you could watch the foreground foundation moving relative to that, then you could kind of see it, but you really had to be watching the right spot. And then also a lot of love and recognition of the Easter eggs that I kind of scattered all in there. So of course there was the reference to Toy Story, which a lot of people got. That was a very obvious reference. If you've seen Toy Story, it's of course the scene with the claw that comes down and gets the little alien squeaky toys. So a lot of people recognizing that. The one reference that was a lot more subtle and that some people got and other people completely missed was, of course, the Monty Python reference. So this one is a little bit, I didn't want to be too blunt about this one. I didn't want to hit the viewer over the head, so it was a very subtle reference, and it was just a little tiny audio clip. After I said a shrubbery, I pulled the clip of them saying, "A what? A what?" And some people got that, and other people didn't. Other people were like, oh, that would have been a great moment to make a reference. Whenever people say shrubbery, the only thing I can think about is Monty Python. And I was like, yeah, me too. That's why there's a reference in there. But a lot of people did get it, fortunately. Alicia said the Toy Story reference was a given, but Monty Python was snuck in pretty well. And I actually rewound to make sure that I heard right. Ravenwood says, a shrubbery, great Easter egg. I loved the Slo-Mos as well. So yes, a lot of appreciation for the Monty Python references. I have to say, I think that Monty Python, and especially the Holy Grail, is probably my most referenced piece of pop culture, of media that I reference in my videos. So this is definitely not the first, nor shall it be the last. So if you're a Monty Python fan, good news for you. Then we'll get into, really quick, the probably the largest category of comments, and that was, why are you removing the stumps with an excavator? Why aren't you using a stump grinder? So Bridget asked, do they have stump grinding in Canada? That's generally how we remove large tree stumps where they're not wanted. And this does always make me giggle when people ask me questions like this, because it's Canada. It's not a third world country. We do have stump grinders. We even have free universal health care. So yeah, we do have stump grinders. So somebody said, why not use a stump grinder? You can even grind a stump with a chainsaw. Somebody else said, the person who cuts down trees could help you with the stump grinder. So here's the thing. There's a few reasons why I honestly didn't even see this category of comment coming, because it just, I don't know, it seemed so obvious to me, but I guess I have all the necessary background. So let me try to share that background and context with you. We didn't rent the excavator for the purpose of pulling out the trees. We rented the excavator because that is the proper tool to build the rock wall that is coming up in the tomorrow's episode and the episode after that. And it just happened to be that while we have it, we figured, let's get rid of the tree stumps as well, and it's going to be a tool that will be good enough. It's also a little bit of a case of when the only tool you'll have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we happen to have an excavator. It was going to work well enough to get the stumps out of there, so that's what we used. But there's also a more practical aspect behind that as well. Well, besides the fact that Phil's dad is a master operator of the excavator, he owns a slightly larger but very, very similar Kubota shovel excavator. And so he can operate them. It's basically an extension of his hand. He's really, really good at operating them. And it's not like stump grinders are hard to operate, but he has much more familiarity with the Kubota than he would with a stump grinder. But there's also just the question of practicality. So you can get absolutely giant stump grinders, and that's probably the type that Gwendolyn is talking about. The person who cuts down the trees might also have a stump grinder. They might have one that looks more like this, where it's huge and it can eat through the stumps fairly quickly. I am not as familiar with the giant one, so I don't know how quickly it can work through a stump, but there's the fact that, first of all, we couldn't rent one. I can't find one in my area. Maybe there is one, but I don't know where to get it, whereas it was fairly straightforward actually to rent the excavator. There's also the fact that if you look at, the reason it goes fast is because it has that giant circular blade on it. But that means that you're actually kind of at risk of hitting your foundation before you hit your stump. Now, there would be a way to go about it. You know, you'd have to dig quite low, and then eat out the stump by moving purely horizontally, but you couldn't really come at it at an angle. Otherwise, your giant blade would hit your foundation before it would hit your stump, just, you know, by the way that circles work. So there's that. There's also the fact we'd have to pay somebody to operate it, which would cost money, or we'd have to rent a second tool, which even if we could find one in my area, it would be renting a second tool, another piece of equipment. You can also get significantly smaller ones. I know that often places like Home Depot, now we don't have a Home Depot anywhere near us, but places like Home Depot would rent out smaller ones, but they're very small, and for just a stump like this that's shown on screen, it's going to take you between 2 and 3 hours to grind that one stump out. And when I thought about it, I was curious, so I went and I looked at the timestamps of all the video clips that I took, because that's the fun thing. They all have, you know, I can tell exactly when I pressed record on every video clip. So the excavator rolled off the truck and we started work at almost exactly 7:45, and that last shrubbery was carted off. That shot was at 10:47, so almost exactly 3 hours to get all of the stumps from all around our property, with the exception of that one stump in the front. And as I said in the video last week, that one took about another hour. So 4 hours in total to get everything off of the property, whereas with that 4 hours we could have gotten maybe 2 of the smaller stumps out with a stump grinder. So besides it being a question of the excavator was what we had on hand and what we'd paid for and what our operator had expertise in, was also just a matter of, honestly, it was the faster way to go. Now, somebody did comment, they had a good point. Let's see. Yeah, it was Alicia who said, it seemed to me there would have been less strain on the foundation if you had chopped the stump to bits as opposed to prying it out. That is a valid point. I do think that using a grinder to get the stump out would have been a little bit more gentle on the foundation, but of course, we didn't know before we started that it was going to be like that. And again, there just wasn't a grinder on hand. The fact that the roots had already penetrated through the foundation had kind of already trashed that section of the foundation anyway. Now, for sure, we made the damage worse. Like, we wiggled stuff even more loose as we were shaking that spot. But if it was already able to move that much, there was already some damage down there. So that was why we didn't use a stump grinder, even though, yes, we do have them in Canada. Then last off, we've got some miscellaneous comments. I wasn't gonna comment anything on the city waterman. There were plenty of comments with some opinions on how useful or helpful he may or may not have been, and I was not going to speak on it. And then I saw this comment that said, that waterman was as useful as teats on a boar. And I just love that expression so much, I thought I would share it. That did kind of sum it up, about as useful as teats on a boar. Aqua Aurora wrote, did Canal have a cathedral choir moment seeing the roots afterwards, or is she still more an above ground stick rather than a below ground stick type dog? And the answer to that is, if you can throw it, she will bring it back. Where were we? So we were somewhere else, and I just pulled a root out of the ground, and she thought it was the best thing ever. It has all kinds of extra flavoring and seasoning. It's basically been marinating in the ground for decades, so she very much enjoys the under the ground sticks as well. Cindy Harvey wrote, call me weird, but I loved this video. Thank you, Cindy. I am glad that you enjoyed the video. Call me weird, But it would be very weird if I would make videos to put out on YouTube thinking that people wouldn't love them. So it is always my goal to make videos that you will love, and apparently sometimes I miss the mark, but it is always my goal to make videos that people enjoy. Smarter than a waffle. At 1839, those are Victorian death stairs. Lol. And last but not least, the comment of the video has to go to Zingcat, who wrote, "When people say, buy a house, put down some roots, they don't mean it like that." That one did make me giggle, and kind of ties into what a lot of people were saying on less comical notes, which is basically that this whole video should be a lesson, should be shown as a documentary for why you should not plant trees close to buildings, why you should be pretty diligent about picking, uprooting volunteers, baby trees, sproutlings that have started to grow very close to your house before they get big enough, before they get so big that you need to bring in, 4-ton excavators to get them out of the ground. So yeah, very good point. I had said in a much earlier episode, I had talked about actually good policies for how far to plant trees from the house. And I did have some people with various advice on that. Obviously, it depends on different trees have different root wingspans. Obviously, the best policy I've heard is, look at about how tall the tree is expected to grow and plant it at least that far away from your house. So if it's a tree, a species that tends to get 15 feet tall, plant it at least 15 feet away from your house. If not more is better. So yeah. With that said, everybody, go walk around your property right now. Don't put it off. Stop procrastinating. Go walk around your property, see what's growing there. Do a little bit of light weeding. If you want, you can put one of my videos on in the background, and I'll keep you company as you do that weeding. And with all that, I'm going to sign off and say that I'll catch you tomorrow with more motorized mayhem. Have a great day, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Boop.